Welcome back to the Lunchtime Draft Talk. I'm Joe Deleone here with the Believe Network, host of the Ruffino and Joe Show and NFL Draft analyst for A to Z Sports. Today, we've got another New Jersey Italian here to talk New York Giants football, that being Bob Papa, who's the voice of the New York Giants, as well as a host on Sirius XM's NFL channel, host of Believe in Giants and the Manja Cast here on Believe. Bob, I appreciate taking the time right now to hop on with us because it is peak freak out season, it feels like, for Giants fans trying to figure out what is going to happen at this third overall pick. I want to start by talking about this recent news that broke on Monday night that Adam Schefter reported that there's a private workout happening in Boulder with Shedeur Sanders, that they're getting extra eyes on him. I just wanted to start by gauging your thoughts on, do you think that Shedeur Sanders is a viable option for the Giants' needs at the current moment and the current, in a way, desperation that the front office has, where they need to start to move this thing in the right direction?
It's a great question. Talking with former NFL head coaches, including Todd Haley, who I do my show with on Sirius XM occasionally, he said, you bring a guy in to your building so you have them on your terms, but sometimes you want to go to their place for the private workout to just find out more about the individual. And maybe it's where that player decides to go to eat, what type of place he picks, whatever the case is, because you're always looking for a little bit of intel. And I think he is a viable option for the Giants. They don't have a quarterback of the future. I mean, they have two guys that are veteran players that the likelihood of them being on the Giants next year is probably pretty slim, or one of them. So I think if they really love Shedeur Sanders and he's available at 3, I think you have to really consider it. And I think if they consider it, I think it almost kind of speaks to Joe Schoen's talking points from early in the offseason that he's not going to mortgage the future of the franchise, because with Russell Wilson and with Jameis Winston on the roster, you've got two viable options to play quarterback. And despite the talk about Russell Wilson and his decline in play, he's still going to be a Hall of Famer. It's not like, he's horrible. So I think it's a viable option for them. Now it's a matter of if they love him, because you don't take a quarterback at 3 if you just like him a lot.
Right. That's now become the biggest aspect of this, is that there's not a lot of great quarterback options, but if Shedeur Sanders is there and worthy of them selecting him, they have to sell themselves on it. They have to feel that that is a move that is going to set them up for the future, or at least turn things in a better direction. I kind of think it's funny to look at Russell Wilson, and you just mentioned he's a Hall of Famer. He's been to Super Bowls. He's done some amazing things with the Seahawks. Kind of slightly reminds me of when Kurt Warner, people always forget that he was a New York Giant for a very brief period of time, with the amazing career that he had before he was with the Giants, and then the way that he finished things off with the Cardinals. I feel like there was such a overanalyzation when Wilson came in and also Jameis Winston came in. I think everybody was trying to check the temperature. Like, what did that mean for what the Giants thought they were setting themselves up for? Do you think that Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston, depending on who starts, is enough for this team to compete this upcoming year? Or is it just a contingency plan if they didn't end up drafting a quarterback?
I think Russell Wilson gives them a chance to be competitive. Because, he played some pretty good ball, and then it kind of all fell apart for them in that game in Baltimore, where he was actually running down the middle of the field and decided to lower his shoulder at about the 5-yard line and fumble. They were going in for the go-ahead score. They were kind of controlling that game, and it's like the Steelers' season fell apart thereafter. So I think there's still some good football in Russell Wilson. It's just not the Russell Wilson of old that used to make you think of, like, Fran Tarkington. He'd spin around and retreat 20 yards and then hit you for a 40-yard play. He doesn't have that escapability anymore. But I think he's an upgrade. I have a soft spot for Daniel Jones, and I really do believe in his skill set as a player. But the way things were going and the lack of confidence that he played with, I could think of a handful of games that, if you take the way Russell Wilson played earlier in the year and you put him in with the Giants and some of the things that were missed, the Giants might have won some more games. There was a bunch. Think about the game in Pittsburgh that they were in, that they should have won that game, as an example, the Monday night game. So, yeah, I think Russell Wilson can be an upgrade for them and translate into some more wins and being a more competitive football team, coupled with the moves they've made defensively.
Yeah, I also believe one of the mischaracterizations for kind of what you just let in there, that this Giants team does have a really good defense. They've got some really premier players, and the current projection, if they don't end up going with Shedeur Sanders, is that they're going to consider drafting one of the best available defenders that are on the board. The two that keep getting brought up are Abdul Carter from Penn State and Travis Hunter from Colorado, who's a hybrid wide receiver cornerback prospect. I'm just, from your angle, which do you think makes the most sense to go with, just from the pure position standpoint? Does it make sense to go with Carter and maybe trade away Kayvon Thibodeau, or would they rather have Travis Hunter, who could be a superstar on and off the field for them?
It's a great question. There are a lot of people that say these two players are the two players in the draft that have generational talent, that they're going to walk in and be one of your best players immediately and potentially be a Pro Bowl player right off the bat. You have to take one of those guys if they're there. And listen, if you look at it, Joe, either player kind of is in an area where the Giants have already invested in. I mean, they used a first-round pick to take Kayvon Thibodeau. They used a first-round pick to take Deonte Banks.
Yeah.
Well, most people believe that, and they just spent money on Paulson Adebo, so he's starting. Most people feel that Hunter's greatest skill set in the NFL is to be a starting cornerback, and then you can create numerous packages to use him on the field offensively. You're not playing both ways full-time in the NFL. So either way, you're kind of drafting at a strength position, but you can never have you can never have enough good football players. And it's the old Ernie Accorsi line. You can't have enough pass rushers. Phil Simms told the story last week on our Believe in Giants podcast. We had him on as a guest. He's the quarterback of the Giants in 1984. And he sees Harry Carson and Lawrence Taylor and Brad Van Pelt and Brian. He sees this linebacker room. And then with the third overall pick in the draft, the Giants selected Carl Banks out of Michigan State. And Phil's like, what are we doing with another linebacker? We need receivers, tight ends. But they took who they believe was the most impactful player. Obviously, it paid dividends. I have no problem taking Abdul Carter. There's enough situations in today's NFL with the way the ball is thrown and the frequency that it's thrown that you can't utilize all three guys at the same time. The other thing is, with all due respect to Kayvon Thibodeau, has he established himself as a down-in, down-out dominant player? And the answer to that is no. I mean, yeah, he had the double-digit sacks 2 years ago. But I look at, first he had the injury last year, but like in big games against big opponents, against top-notch quarterbacks or top-notch offensive lines, is he still dominating like Micah Parsons does or TJ Watt does? And I think the answer at this point is no, he hasn't gotten there yet. So I don't think you trade anybody. I think you play out his fifth-year option and you worry about that headache when it comes down the road. But if you believe that Abdul Carter is the best player in the draft and you can take him, or Travis Hunter, you'll figure out the Deonte Banks component after the fact. But I would take either one if they were sitting there.
Yeah, I think generally it would theoretically be easier with a DB room to move Banks maybe inside to the slot spot, have Travis Hunter play as the other outside corner opposite of Paulson Adebo.
But isn't that the Drew Phillips role that you're excited about with him from last year?
It's a good point. That's the whole musical chairs that we end up playing, and it's part of what you're talking about here with the defensive line is you could have a crowded room and you just got to figure out ways to get everybody involved and and on the field. And maybe somebody does end up getting booted. Maybe somebody does end up getting traded. I do lean with what you just brought up with that great example of with Carl Banks when he came in. You have the opportunity to have an insanely gifted pass rush, the best and deepest pass rush in the NFL, with the ability to utilize guys in very unique circumstances. So I really like the thought of Abdul Carter, and I almost didn't even, obviously wasn't around for the Super Bowls in the 80s because I'm I wasn't old enough
born
to
yet.
have been born yet to put it that way. But to remember that history and to know that history, that was the draft approach, and they just said we got to take the most impactful player, can't go wrong drafting just elite dominant football players. I think that makes me wonder though.
Well, just to follow up on that point.
Yeah.
Bring it to more modern times. You don't know if you were born yet for this one, but the Giants had Strahan. They drafted OC. They had drafted Justin Tuck. Right. Plus, they had a handful of other rotational pass rushers, and they still drafted Matthias Kiwanuka. Same reason. Ernie Accorsi gained the same reason. Yeah. You can't have enough pass rushers. And even don't be scared to draft a player at your position of strength because it will sort itself out.
No, absolutely. And I do remember I was alive for that defensive unit. And I do remember that the amount of depth that they had with that unit was also incredible. And the one thing, and I don't think you would do this with Abdul Carter, you do have the advantage of him once being an off-ball linebacker. I'm not moving him back to middle linebacker, but having the ability to play him in space if you theoretically needed him to, that is also a benefit for him at that third overall spot. But I think
that's the beauty of Micah Parsons. And why
exactly.
Why the previous regime, for whatever the reasons were, decided that they weren't going to take him in the 10 hole. I mean, they could, or whatever, 11th, where they could have drafted Micah Parsons, but everybody knew that the Giants weren't interested. Because do you think that because Dallas wanted the corner, Surtain. Mm-hmm. Denver surprised everybody by taking him. But everybody knew at that point in time Parsons was not going to be drafted by the Giants. Do you think that the Cowboys would have ever made that trade with the Eagles in the Devontae Smith get for Philadelphia to leapfrog the Giants if the Cowboys had any belief in the world that the Giants might take Parsons? They knew they weren't.
Right.
Parsons isn't just an outside backer. They line him up at middle. They line him up at defensive end. They drop him in coverage. So if you believe Abdul Carter has that same skill set, it's up to Shane Bowen to figure out how to use him.
Exactly. And there's a strong comparison between the two of them in the way that they play the game, the power that they're able to generate. So you make that mistake once, you don't want to make that mistake a second time. And I think that all of this ties into the amount of runway that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll have for this upcoming year. I think that they've been given a lot more time than previous regimes, which is good and bad. They get more chances to try and figure this out compared to other opportunities that have been a lot more short-lived. What do you think the Maras and John Mara needs to see from the team this year if they don't go quarterback that would afford them another opportunity the following offseason to maybe pick that quarterback and then continue building this the foundation of this?
Oh, it's easy. You can't be almost eliminated before you go trick-or-treating. And you can't be basically eliminated before you sit down for Thanksgiving dinner. I think they need, first of all, if they stay at 3, that player better be one of the best players on the team the minute he walks in the door. Because it happens with other teams. Just like Malik Neighbors was, just like Odell Beckham Jr., and just like Saquon Barkley, those guys were the best players on the team the minute they walked in the room, or one of the best players. So number 3's got to be that. If they stay where they are with their first pick of the second round, that player has to walk in and be a day one, if not starter, rotational starter. They have to have impacts because let's face it, the first draft didn't go well.
Yeah.
And the second draft, So they're kind of hanging their hat on this last draft. They got to hit this draft out of the park as well. And I think if the team, and I think Russell Wilson can help in this area, if the team can remain competitive, and with obviously the added wild card team, when you get into the month of December and you're starting to go to Christmas parties and you're preparing a few weeks in advance of what you're doing for Christmas and where you're going, what holiday party you're going to, and when are we getting the tree decorated, and the Giants are still in contention somewhere, still with an outside chance for a wild card spot or whatever, I think that could be good enough, because that means you're building in the right direction. That means you're somewhere around the 500 mark and you're in contention based on tiebreakers. And I think that, and then with this draft being a killer draft, I think it would afford them an opportunity to continue. But if we're talking about Halloween time, and I'm already starting to plan my trip to Hawaii to work the PGA Tour Champion season opener in Kona in January, and I can book my flights already, that's not going to be good for anybody.
It kind of makes me wonder, and it's kind of how this roster's constructed at the current moment, if the defensive heavy draft, that they don't think, all right, we just need to push all of our attention towards the defensive side of the football. And I know that that's very risky, unbalanced way to approach things. But if you spend that first pick on Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, and then in the second round, you get one more defensive starter with a class that's been described as one where you can get starters throughout the entire first 3 rounds, it kind of makes me think that the Giants might believe that that's how they can live, is by just grinding out close games. That also makes me wonder, do you think that they're satisfied with the current offensive line? Do you think that there is maybe any more improvements that they can do to this offensive line during this draft, and that they might be aggressive there? Because I feel like it still has not been fixed in the past decade that we've been talking about it.
It's one of the most amazing things ever, and I don't mean it in a positive way. But I mean, we're talking about 3 general managers, from Jerry Reese to Dave Gettleman to Joe Shane, and the various different coaching staffs and O-line coaches. And the thing is, it's not like they've neglected the O-line. They've used high picks going all the way back to Justin Pugh and on through of offensive linemen. And it's uncanny how many of them have not materialized. And some were jettisoned, but then they've gone on to play well in other places. And that's where you get into the problem of switching coaches, switching staff, switching philosophies, and not being patient with it. But I agree with you. I think they're going to have to look. Look, they brought in a couple of veteran guys to play swing tackle. I think fans realized that Josh Azudu is not a swing tackle. Okay. I think everybody has understood that. It seems like they were the last ones to know that as we watched some of these things unfold. So they have some legitimate swing tackles. What do they do with Evan Neal as far as trying to move him inside? And then what do they see in the draft as far as being able to supplement? And then there'll always be a veteran free agent that pops up in the course of the summer. I don't think you can win in the NFL scoring 14 points a game. I don't care how good their defense is. And, we saw some games this year where teams were, kicking field goals and winning games, playing good defense. But at the end of the day, right, you got to be able to score in this league. And the modus operandi in today's NFL is, if we can just bend and not break, the offense will eventually make a mistake. The Giants have to be better at sudden change. They have to be better at explosive plays, because that's what the winning teams do, is they hit you with explosives. I mean, you think about the game against the Eagles at MetLife Stadium, right? I mean, the Giants are sitting there and they think they're going to stop the Eagles on a 4th and 2 or whatever it was, and they don't run the Philly push, and boom, A.J. Brown, 40-yard touchdown. Like, you got to have some of those plays. You can't just throw a 5-yard hitch and then 4 more downs, because eventually you're going to screw up or you're going to get sacked. So I think they have to be more explosive offensively.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough draft class to hopefully find some sort of explosiveness, and somewhere on day 2 is going to need to be where they secure that. Bob, I know that we got to let you go
Now, we
before we
got time
close
for a
that.
few more
Oh,
minutes. My schedule
okay.
changed a little.
All right, I appreciate that. It makes me also wonder, though, you're talking about explosiveness. The running back room leaves a lot to be desired. And I know that's kind of a sore subject because Saquon Barkley just won a Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles. I feel like this draft class presents him with the opportunity to select multiple running backs, maybe one early, maybe one late. I think outside of Tyrone Tracy, though, that they really need to find something and they need to find better depth because Devin Singletary is not explosive. He's towards the end of his career. Eric Gray has not really played up to that hope that maybe some people thought when he was picked a few years ago. I just wanted to get your thoughts on what do you think this running back room needs and what should the Giants be looking for in a running back this year?
Well, I agree with you 100%. They need another running back. I mean, Tyrone Tracy is a great story. And now that they have their coach, the running backs coach from Iowa, I think that's a good thing. And I think he could be a developing player because the NFL is filled with guys that got drafted in the mid to late rounds of running backs that go on to be very successful players in the league. But I think based on the depth of the running back position in this draft, you have to take one. You have, listen, it hasn't, my sources from people that I know in the college game were ecstatic when the Giants drafted Eric Gray. They're like, man, you're getting a really good player. It hasn't panned out as a returner, as a player. The speed that you see on the field is just, it's not explosive. And you're right about Singletary. So I think that you can roll with a guy like Singletary for that if you want, if you're going to bring in another young player to have a veteran presence, although your running backs coach now kind of brings some of that to the table because of his experience as a player. But I believe that they have to add to the running back room. And it's got to be a back that's multiple, that can catch the ball out of the backfield because that's so important in today's NFL as well. I mean, and how many short yardage situations did the Giants not get last year?
Right.
I mean, you got to have somebody that runs tough.
That's why and that's why I think that they're with the picks that they have and the depth in this running back class that there's an opportunity to take Ollie Gordon in the 4th round and then come back around and take maybe Bashal Tutin from Virginia Tech is still available to play a different role. There's just so many different play styles that can be captured. I like the thought of Kyle Monungai, the Rutgers kid, being a part of this running back room, and I think that he could carve out a role as well.
That's a good
He
thought.
runs super hard. He's a local kid. He's from Roseland, New Jersey. He obviously went to Rutgers, a Don Bosco kid. That would be certainly exciting for this Giants team. The one thing I wanted to round us out with here before we close out, and this is looking a little bit further ahead. How big do you think it would be if the Giants in 2 years, 1 year, whenever he declares, if they ended up with Arch Manning? And I don't know how much you've paid attention to Arch, the Texas quarterback, nephew of Eli Manning. I feel like all I hear about now that Giants fans have decided that they don't want Shedeur Sanders, all they talk about is we're waiting for Arch Manning. Do you think that it is worth the patience, or do you think that we shouldn't just live into the Manning love that just continues to survive past Eli?
Well, he certainly looks like he's going to be a really good player. And obviously he's physical, when they put him in for specific running plays. But we don't know how he's going to develop, right? I mean, there are so many times where people talk about these quarterbacks and they project out who's going to be, and then you get halfway through the college season and there are other people that have vaulted past them, i.e. Jaden Daniels as an example.
Yeah.
And Quinn Ewers was talked about as a lock 1st round pick 2 years ago. Wait until Quinn Ewers comes out. So I don't know. I don't think GMs, owners, organizations can afford to play that game. Oh yeah, we'll do this, but then what happens if you win too many games? What happens if the team that's picking first that year is in desperate need of a quarterback and he's the number one prospect. So what? You're gonna plan for something that you may have no control over a year or two from now? Then what? You've just wasted more time. No, I don't think that's feasible to do that. I don't think it makes any kind of sense. And that's fantasy football talk. That's fantasy fan talk. We'll just wait for Arch. We'll wait for Arch if he declares next year or 2 years. I'll give you another example. There were, in the previous regime, there were people in the building that loved, and I mean loved, Justin Herbert. And I think Justin Herbert, in his contacts with Giants people and scouts, loved the thought of coming to play for the Giants. And the Giants were in a position to potentially be able to draft Justin Herbert or maneuver for Justin Herbert. And then Justin Herbert decided, you know what? I'm staying at Oregon because my brother's an incoming tight end. I love the college experience, and I always wanted to play on the same team with my brother. You should have seen the look on the scout's face in the building. It was like somebody had stole their teddy bear. So those are the things you don't have control over. The Jets were certain. They had the number one pick in the draft. They were going to get Peyton Manning. And Peyton Manning decided, you know what? I love college. I love the experience. I love Rocky Top. I'm staying. I want to get my last year in because you only get X amount of years, unlike now where I think you could play college football for 8 years and make it a career. But, it would be foolish to try to plan your franchise's future on the chance that you could be in position a year or two from now to potentially get a player that a year or two from now, I don't know, does he suffer a huge injury? Well, you have no idea.
Yeah. I think you put that perfectly because, being a Giants fan, seeing it on Twitter, it's just such a common narrative for fans to be like, oh, they need to prepare for Arch Manning. From what I've heard, I don't even think Arch is going to declare for the 2026 draft. So you're making a decision for something that's not even certain of if he's a part of next year. You don't even know if he's good enough as a full-time starter. He looks great in the little spurts, and I have faith in that he will be good. But you can wait 2 years just because of the love for the Manning family. I think it would be a match made in heaven for him to be a New York Giant. It's just, as you just mentioned there's so many different things that can change over a period of time. I'm rooting for it, but I just, so much can happen in the next 2 years that is going to impact Arch being a New York Giant.
Well, just think about from a Giant fan standpoint.
Yeah.
Just think about what the last 2 years have been like. And just think about since 2013, other than the 2016 season that they made the playoffs and then the boat trip and all that other stuff. And then 2022 was a road playoff win. But think about everything in between. So what are you going to do? You're going to we're going to stink for 2 more years so we could be in the position to draft Arch. Well, we're going to stink this year because if he comes out next year, but then we're going to make sure we're not that good either again because then he may come out the year after that.
Yeah.
But you'll wind up with the second pick and the team in front of you, like Tennessee this year, is definitely taking Cam Ward. Then what? Are you going to ask your fans to sit through 8 more years of rebuilding? No.
Right. There's too much to take into consideration there that could change in the next 2 seasons. But Bob, this was great. It makes me feel better as a Giants fan having this conversation, feeling that there is a path to competitiveness and success in the next few seasons. Really appreciate you with your busy schedule and everything coming up for the 2025 draft, of you sitting down with me. Where can everybody tune in to Believe in Giants and ManjaCast and anything else that you're looking to plug here?
Yeah, if you want to watch me cook, I cook every week on the ManjaCast, so it's good. I don't know what's on the menu for this week's show. We do.
I was about to ask, what any inkling of a thought of what you're going to go with? Or are you still working shop?
I'm not sure. I made Michael K only eats chicken parm, so I made chicken parm for him and chicken piccata for my co-host Chris Bizignano. I've made cacio e pepe. I've made a carbonara. I taught Phil Simms how to make a carbonara on the air.
Nice.
So we do different things each and every week. I don't know, maybe homemade pizza this week. We'll have to see. I have 2 days to decide. But yeah, it's live on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as part of the Believe Network, and Believe in Giants again on the Believe Podcast Network and wherever you get your audio, Spotify, wherever. It's there. Just like yours.
Of course. And make sure to go and check that out. And if you haven't done so already, folks, and you're tapped in, please subscribe to the Believe YouTube channel. Hit the like button on the video. Drop a comment. Just thoughts on our conversation today for the Giants. We'll get to those comments on a future stream. Everybody enjoy the rest of your week. We'll talk to you on Thursday.